Hello, middies. For your homework assignment that I assigned you guys, I'm asking you guys to um, complete your guided notes for this. So kind of gonna go through this. I know we talked about this already in class, but the importance of criminal profiling, whether it's a serial killer case or it's a murder case or whatever the case might be, profiling plays a major part in crime. So I want to talk about this really quick to tie this into really our next topic. So then we already did all this together, so this should already be done. So using what we know about criminal profiling, trying to step into the shoes of a criminal profiler. So obviously you see a bunch. So obviously when you're looking at this victim list, so obviously these were women that were murdered by the hands of a serial killer. So here's the victim list. So think about in your head, what are some common characteristics that they might have? Obviously, you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, well, for one, they're all women. Okay, there you go. So that's one characteristic that we know what they all have in common in terms of a victim list. Um, Now let's look at the age here. This is where things kind of get a little bit murky because you obviously see some older women, you see some younger women that are mixed in. You see light colored hair, dark colored hair. So this is where things kind of become astray with the victim list. There's no consistent age group. There's not a particular look that the serial killer was kind of going for. So you also see this. These are their names. It kind of shows their age too. Again, you see ladies ranging from 19, their 20s. A couple people in their 20s here. You see. You don't really see any middle-aged women, in the 30s and 40s, but then you jump up to like the 60s and 70s and 80s. So it's kind of weird how you see that jump from late teens to early 20s, and then from there you see a big jump to older women. And obviously, you see these are the dates that they died in. So you see several in June, a couple in August, a break, December, a little bit of a break, March, a month or two off, May, a little bit of time off, and then September, November, January. So that's what we know about this victim list. So as I said before, victims are all female. Age and race is not consistent. They all kind of vary all over the spectrum. This is what we do know too. All these women were murdered in their own apartments. There was no signs of any forced entry. All the victims were raped. All their bodies were left in obscene positions. They were strangled, usually with their own silk stockings. So let me ask you this. So based on what we just talked about there in terms of no forced entry, they all were murdered in their own opponent. What can you assume about the serial killer? Again, think in your head. No forced entry, murder women in their own apartment. That obviously should tell law enforcement that whoever did this, the murderer, may have known these women. May have built relationships with women, whether it was a friendship or something more than that, to allow them to be in their apartments. There was no forced entry, everything, being kicked down or windows being broken or the case might be. Um, so you might think this person might be pretty social to be able to maybe talk their way into somebody's apartment. So here's the accused killer, Albert de DeSalvo. Was obviously born, and the dates he's born, the date that he died. But this also shows that he was an average guy. He looks normal in the picture. He's married. He has two children. He was in the army, former veteran. Worked in a rubber factory, shipyard, construction. Many of his, family and friends, community members would describe him as a loving father, devoted husband, um, very mild-mannered, neat, well-liked. But then you also had the other darker side, what most people didn't realize about him, is that he was also known as the Boston Strangler. The same guy. So again, picture. This guy terrorized Boston for a couple years. um, over 13 victims, but rumor has it it may have been more than that, may have been over more than 300 over the course of his life. He was also known as not only the Boston Strangler, but the Measure because he really measured his victims. Took planning in order to do that. But he was also, although he did have a job and family and friends, he was known as being a paranoid schizophrenic, a cold-blooded killer, and remorseless for things that he did. All right, so the FBI with crime analysis, they have two different types of profiling. You have an organized offender, somebody who's very organized in how they murder, and you have a disorganized, and there's different characteristics that go with it. So kind of going through the organized offender here, you have somebody who's very highly intelligent, steady employment, is able to hold a job, very socially adequate, has friends, and very devoted in terms of being a very valuable member of the community, a good citizen, usually married and kids, high birth order. They may have became middle class to upper class upbringing. Um, Childhood discipline may have been inconsistent, but situational stress causes the crime. Stress or other factors might entice them to commit these crimes or murders. And oftentimes these men are very charming. Often they're very mobile. They can adapt to different situations. They can move from city to city, state to state, no problem. They follow the crime in the media. They follow what they do. They're interested to see how they're perceived by the media and the attention that it gets. So example that would be Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy was, again, fit all these things. Could hold a job, very intelligent, blend in. So then you also have your disorganized offenders. These obviously think of they're basically the complete opposite of an organized. So more or less, guys, 75% of serial killers fall into the organized route. Then you also have 25% of others that go into this category. They might be below average intelligence, very socially inadequate, have a hard time making friends, might be weird to most, maybe loners, sexually incompetent. We'll kind of leave it at that. They work at unskilled labor, hop from job to job. It's very difficult for them to hold a job. They usually come from low order birth status, from poor backgrounds. They receive some type of harsh discipline as a young kid. Some type of trauma typically is associated with that. They usually live alone. They don't date. Poor personal hygiene, like not brushing their teeth, smell, look that not take care of themselves. They're not really interested in the media and following. They're nocturnals. I mean, they mostly come out at night, and very distinct behavioral changes, mood swings that they get. So a prime example of that type of killer would be like a Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker. So, if you've watched Netflix, The Night Stalker, this is a prime example of he'd fit in that unorganized, very below average intelligence, a loner, etc. All right, now in terms of crime scenes, so those are all. The last thing that was more personality. Now, if you look at the crime scene, you can so if you're a profiler, you can kind of tell some of these things. So again, if you're an organized, you can tell that the crime scene is typically very organized. Maybe the body is constructed in a certain way. The thing is very planned. Things are wiped down. There's very little evidence, no fingerprints. Victims are typically targeted, which is again leaves like a very controlled scene to what the murderer can kind of do at the scene. They personalize the victim to become friends or lovers with them to earn their trust. So kind of going back to that first, the Boston Strangler, again, there was no forced entry into their apartments. So it leads you to believe that he had the ability to charm people, to personalize them, to earn their trust. You control the conversations, you control the scenario, you control the who, what, where, when, how, through your ability to personalize them. Typically, the victims are usually very submissive. They usually are women that are looking, that maybe have some issues or troubles, so to speak, that the victim typically targets. Typically, you have restraints that are used, very aggressive acts from the individual Typically, the body is moved. Again, going back to the organized, you want to make sure you control the crime scene. You might hide the body in the woods. You might move the body somewhere else. The body is usually taken. Weapons are taken, so there's no weapons left at the crime scene. Very little evidence, no fingerprints, no other things. It's very difficult for police and profilers to link somebody to this type of crime. Then you have your disorganized crime scenes. These are usually very spontaneous, spur of the moment types of killings. The killings display grotesque anger and violence towards the body. Typically, the victim is unknown to the individual, so there's very little personalization or conversation going on. You depersonalize the victim, again, not knowing them. You don't charm them, you just the murder. These crime scenes are very chaotic. Usually, there's typically evidence that's left over. Bodies usually typically at the crime scene, and there might be a weapon that's left behind. Okay, so this was necessarily planned. So example, organized killer, you have Ted Bundy, plans out the murder, maybe accustomed to carrying it out quickly, will bring a kit with him, rope, handcuffs, chloroform. Again, with his charm, he personalizes the victim, gains their trust, and then obviously performs the act. So organized killer kills the victim with awareness. Oh, sorry. Victim kills the victim with awareness of the evidence at the crime scene, may be cleaned or destroyed, might move the body or bury it to evade or delay the discovery. Killer will not be involved further with victim's body, but may take clothing, jewelry. So if you guys have seen Dexter before, he took blood samples of his victims and collected it. You might take a picture, you might take jewelry, you might take something from the victim as a trophy, essentially. That you're proud of what you did, and to remember that person in that moment, you might keep something of theirs. Whereas the disorganized killer, like David Berkowitz, for instance, murders usually spur the moment. There's usually no planning involved. The only objective is to really kill. Does not bring tools to kill. There's usually no contact with the victim prior to the murder. No rape, no torture. So. Now, also another thing is too, the mobility is also could be different among serial killers too. So, for instance, John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer, they typically lived and worked in one location for an extended period of time, for a long time. They hunt and kill in their own area, so they don't go really beyond their borders. They live where they kill. They dispose of their bodies in the same or similar areas with sites selected. So they have a certain area where they kill, and that's where they typically do most of their killing at. They might return to the crime scene or burial site at some point just to hang out. They don't travel very often, so they're very kind of less mobile, we'll say. Whereas you have your other serial killers who are very mobile, like Ted Bundy, who are very transient. They seldom stay in one spot. So you see, like, if you watch the Ted Bundy stuff, he lived in Salt Lake City, Seattle, all over the place. Kills are spread out over a very large area. They dispose of the bodies in random locations. They don't return to the region. So they're very hard to pinpoint because they confuse law enforcement. So there's different types of serial killers. You have your visionaries that they say that they see things. They're psychopathic, that they're directed by another human being or another being above them or mystical being to do the killing. You have your missionary serial killers that they believe that they need to eradicate a certain group. They claim they're not psychotic. There's hedonistic. They actually seek the thrill from killing. And then you have your power control that they get gratification from having dominance, the power of life and death. So those are the 4 different types of serial killers that you might see. And then you have some other misconceptions. Let's kind of skip that. You know what? I'm going to make another video. So I only got 10 more seconds left. So video 2 will be coming up.